Hi everybody, welcome back to Ben's channel. Today, I'm so glad to have invited Carl, the GP of Reforge, a very cutting-edge VC firm in the crypto space. Carl, great to meet you. You want to give us a little bit of introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Super excited to be here today. A little background about myself. I come from engineering, studied computer science about 2 decades ago. So I got into Bitcoin back in 2011. At the time, I was a software developer for working for Northrop Grumman, developing for their next generation fighter jet flight control system. So it was in C++, and naturally, Bitcoin's initial implementation was in C++. And one of the things I noticed was uh, all these pirate sites were taking Bitcoin, and that was what caught my attention because I kept on saying, I remember there was this website called Rapidshare. I don't know if they're still around, but it hosted all the pirate software, and it took Bitcoin. So I started learning about Bitcoin. I was like, wow, like this makes a lot of sense, right? So Bitcoin first, and then it was XRP. I think that was around 2012, 2013. And then later, obviously, Ethereum came out 2015, 2016. And I eventually pivoted from, flight software. I worked for NASA for a bit as well, developing their spacecraft flight software. But it was in 2018, I decided, at the time, most of my money was already in crypto. So I, quit my job and moved to New York, and I created a layer one. I was a CTO co-founder of Logos Network. We raised some capital, but eventually it was acquired by Ripple. So I spent some time at Ripple as well. And eventually became an investor, right? Because I always had a curious heart, so I was learning the new stuff all the time, and then naturally I just gravitate towards like investing. And I spent some time at Shima Capital as their CTO and partner. But most recently, we formed Reforge, which is early stage Web3 investment firm. Yeah, currently I'm the GP, and my partner Alex is also working with me to at this firm, and primarily we invest in the earliest stage of Web3 companies. And I'm happy to dive into the type of like projects we're most interested in, but for now, that's kind of my background.
Cool, sounds good. It sounds like you've been to a lot of different places.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting how the ecosystem in this industry has evolved over the time.
Yeah, for sure. So, first question that pops in my head. So, since you've been, you know, in the crypto industry since the very beginning, and I assume you have been through at least 2, 3 cycles of both the bull and the bear market cycles. So, from a VC perspective, or from the perspective of a person that actually works in crypto, how do you feel the ecosystem being changing in the sense that not just the projects that are evolving, but also how do different components come together? How do people care about different aspects of projects?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for asking this because this is not talked about enough. Particularly, most of the people that we meet these days, they either got into crypto in 2017, 18 during the ICO boom, or a bit later, 2021, 2022. I sometimes come across, people getting into industry back in 2015 when Ethereum first came around. But the one massive difference, and again, I don't come from finance, so I have a very different way of thinking about this industry, right? Specifically, come from engineering. It's like back in 2011, 2012, there was no such thing as crypto industry, right? There was only Bitcoin and some in XRP and maybe a bunch of shit coins that's out there. Uh, People are extremely ideological, meaning people truly believed in creating a parallel financial system, that was right after I actually read the white paper back in 2009, right? But I didn't really seriously get into this in 2011. So like 2008, we had this financial crisis in the US and people were really pissed off. One of the problems that they had was I think the government had tons of money poured into the industry, right? But most of that actually went to the bankers. And there was tons of mortgage-backed security issues, and no banker went to prison except for one, I think. And I think a lot of that directly contributed to the creation of Bitcoin. So, but over time, things have changed, right? These days, it's less about, hey, like, let's make a parallel financial system. It's more about, however you want to interpret the current, like, industry, right? There's a lot of things happening. You still get a bit of like financial innovation, but largely it has become a lot more mercenary than before. You still have very, very good founders that want to create new things and build new stuff, right? But it's not the same compared to before. Even compared to 2018, there were a lot of new projects coming out. I think there was a period of time where the VCs call these projects professor coins, right? But jokes aside, there's real net new innovation that was happening in 2018. Not to say we don't have any net new innovation now. There's still a lot, but there's also tons of noises, right? And I think it's imperative for us to be honest about the current state of crypto. So yeah, I think that the major differences between the type of people that are involved in their goal, right? So yeah.
And one major change that I can see, since we also do a little bit of investing in the primary market as well ourselves, is that, like for example, back in 2021, 2022, as a VC, we get access to tons of good projects, and also it's very friendly to VCs in the sense that once there's a TGE, usually there is a big drop of coin, and then throughout another like 3-5 years, we get the rest of it. However, right now, super majority of the big projects, especially that are led by big names like A16Z, Pantera, Multicoin, etc., all have extremely long cliff period in the sense that after they TGE, we have to wait 1 year. The VCs have to wait 1 year to get any coin at all. Then it's another 3 to 5 year vesting period. So do you think that is a healthy trend? And if so, how do you see it changing the ecosystem and the dynamic between the project team, the VC, and the users?
Yeah. So let's think about this, right? Going back to traditional venture and Web2, it takes about an average of, I think, 11 to 13 years for a company to IPO. And there's very specific metrics how you underwrite an IPO, like a company before they are able to go IPO, right? Sure, there are some bad deals that's being underwritten, but generally speaking, it's very stringent on how you think about an IPO company, right? Now, if you look at Web3, we don't have any of that stuff, right? So first and foremost, generally speaking, from a project that's raised a seed round until it hit liquidity, meaning the token gets listed, generally speaking, right, from the, it varies, but generally it's between 12 to 36 months, and 36 months is being on the higher end. So one of the problems then becomes, what is the stage in which they actually launched this particular token? And if you actually look at many of these applications, they're not complete, right? And if we're being absolutely honest about this, is most projects probably have built less than 10% of what they actually promised, and then they launched the token. Now, you get into the problem of once you launch the token, the TGE occurs, the unlock schedule goes in effect, right? And there is a very direct incentive problem within this particular unlock schedule, is the founders and investors start unlocking the moment the TGE happens, right? So whether it's like a 5-year vest, which is super long, or like a 24 months or 2-year vest, the problem arises when specifically the team portion of the tokens are unlocked, but the product is not delivered, right? Because also, a lot of these crypto founders didn't come from money, right? They've never seen millions of dollars in their life, and as the tokens unlock, they have liquidity and they have the ability to exit. The question then becomes, do they still have the incentive to keep building, right? And I think there exists a huge misalignment on how we think about this today. And hence you're seeing a lot of these projects have longer and longer lockout periods. That's because we actually want to enforce the incentive to be aligned between the founders, the team, and the investors. Now, I don't really want to comment too much on, hey, like what is the healthy duration for the unlock? But the one thing that we cannot ignore is we often see projects which had a massive narrative or a massive vision, but they usually don't end up delivering any of that, right? And I think the problem really originates from the speed to liquidity too fast. Now, we as an industry today, we don't have a good solution to that, right? We can get into the details of how I think we should solve this problem, but that's just the current state of the industry, right? So
I can feel you're a bit of an idealist in this industry.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, VCs have fiduciary duties to our LPs, and we're in the business of making money, right? But I truly believe, like, as part of investing to startups, there's returns that go beyond monetary, right? So moving the industry forward and so forth, and you really have to make sure the incentives is highly coupled and aligned. Otherwise, things go south. And that's a lot of projects. That's what's happening now, right? And of course, like crypto is a relatively new industry, so we do need to go through multiple iterations of like alignment and modifications, right? So
yeah, and also involves the alignment of interest and expectation of the LPs, right?
Yes.
The days that they can just invest half a year later, they get a 200% return. Those days are gone.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, Reforge is going through a round of fundraise, and the LPs' expectations are changing, and I can tell you the LPs. So we have our teams in New York, but we're Chinese Americans, so we also go to Asia for fundraise as well, and the LP expectations of West and East are completely different, right?
Absolutely.
So it's amazing how people think about this so differently, but they're all in the same industry. So
yeah. So since you've already brought it up, I was actually going to ask about your opinion on this as well, because this has been my feeling throughout the entire year that North American VCs, not just VCs, but also market participants like the project teams, the community, are completely talking about different projects, different concepts, having different mindsets as the Chinese community of the correspondents. So why do you think that is the case these days? And is it because right now there's just not that many there's basically just no like major narratives that are leading the way, just like how DeFi did last cycle? Or is it because the tokens are not really appreciating too much, such that there aren't that many new people participating in? Like, how do you see the reason for such segregation of communities?
yeah, I think there's too much noises in general, and what I mean by that is if you go back in time, 2018, right, that period of funding period, you generally know like what projects are better than the rest, right? I mean, Solana came out that time, Avalanche, Hedera Hashgraph came out that period of time. And today you have a lot more participants in the ecosystem, and and even a lot of VCs are not how should I describe this? They're not savvy enough to differentiate the noises from the actual innovation, right? And over time, investors and participants have the tendency to revert back to what they know the most, right? And starting with people, right? So if you're in the East Asia sphere, and these are the people that you hang around with, you're more likely to kind of invest in their projects because you understand them better, right? We're kind of the exception here. We're in New York, so we see a lot of North America deals, but we also understand there's real innovation happening in Asia, right? But naturally, I think it also has to do with how people think about this, right? If you go to Asia, based on my experience, right, people tell us, hey, you have a 6-year fund life. That's too long for us. We want to invest into a 2-year fund and make 5x, right? And if you think about it, that's actually an anomaly, right? Usually, most of the time. Whereas in the U.S., we've encountered many family offices that tell us, hey, your fund life is too short. We love venture funds that are 10 years, right? So it's also how you think about like, I think there's a misconception of what venture is, generally speaking, in some parts of Asia, right? Because venture investing is not a 2-year business. But I think over time things will revert right? People will have the correct understanding of venture business. So
Yeah, I think what you're describing is a healthy participation of ventures in helping the ecosystem grow and help nurturing the projects to keep building what they promised they would build, right? But
yeah,
I think the understanding of how ventures make money is very different between the East and West.
right. No, absolutely right. I mean, there are venture funds out there that claim they're making 5x on 2-year horizon, but most of the deals are in the form of OTC, right? So then we're in the business of highly cycle sensitive and timing sensitive versus actually like innovation based investing, right? So I think the understanding of venture business needs to be fundamentally like corrected. So that yeah, maybe we're a bit off topic on like how we think about the state of
No, there's
industry.
nothing
But,
off
like
topic here. You can just talk about
yeah,
anything you want. Yeah.
because it's very important, right? Like the LP, like because we have to understand a lot of these projects. Most projects are venture backed, right? Meaning the investors of these projects are venture capital firms.
Hmm.
But unless you're unless you're investing your own money, most of these venture capital firms have external LPs. And it's extremely important to align these LPs, limited partners, expectation with the venture firm's expectation, right? One of the questions that I always tell my portfolio companies to ask the ventures when they raise is, what's the lifetime of your fund? Right, because most of the portfolio companies don't want the venture fund to dump their tokens on day one. Right, we all understand they're going to exit at some time, but just not perhaps not day one. And so I think that there's so much work that needs to happen here, right, to make sure that we actually have a sense of like reality here. So, yeah.
For sure. All right. And well, you mentioned innovation quite a few times. So, how do you consider a project to be quote unquote true innovation rather than just noise?
Yeah. So, as the industry evolves, as the industry evolves, innovations will happen at a different stack of the technology, right? Um, and right now today we're in a very awkward position actually. I generally think Web3 user experience is so weird that it just does not make any sense, right? So I'm 37 years old. My parents are around 60, right? There's zero chance of them adopting MetaMask wallet or Rabby wallet, whatever that is, right? And if you think about this, like if you think about this, right, a good analogy is you have a phone, and when you turn on the sound of your phone and you take a picture, it makes a click sound, right? Like for older people, we know where that sound's coming from, right? It's from like a mechanical camera, the clicking sound, right? But for kids, younger kids, they don't know where that's coming from. And why am I using that as an example, right? It's we're animals of behaviors, right? Like if things that no longer matter, we still somehow spend engineering effort. Like even for a company like Apple, they go hire engineers to put in this artificial sound, right? So the lesson here is we don't want to change our behavior, right? Like if we're set in a certain way, we want to continue that. So then the question becomes, why is Web3 so weird, right? Like why is these user experiences are so weird? Like you have to understand when you want to trade, you have to understand what an AMM is. Like why do you want to display what your slippage is to the users, right? You give user, like if you think about this, I just want to know when I trade, what is other people being executed at and what's my price, right? Why are you introducing new verbiage into financial world, right? Like our financial system is thousands of years old, right? Like there's no more new words that need to be introduced, in my opinion, unless you really innovate. So with such concept, I think the innovation actually is a different, like we're in a very weird spot. So instead of trying to come up with new things, we actually should revert our behavior to Web 2, and that's actually part of my venture fund's thesis, right? Is what I call BUXER, builder user experience reversion, right? So we're specifically investing into projects that will enable Web3 applications to achieve user experience parity with Web2 applications. Because at the end of the day, I don't think it makes sense for people to learn all these new user experience. And by the way, when we talk about user experience, we're not talking about like, hey, how do you build the best user interface, right? Because if you actually dig deep into the core of these issues, they're never a user interface problem. It's an infrastructure problem, right? So the lack of infrastructure caused these weird user experience, right? So I think the innovation needs to happen aside from like scalability, performance, security. It really needs to, how do you bring a familiar user experience back to the users? Because
I think one of the issues that I can see is that there aren't that many actual use cases for crypto in the first place. So when we think about Web2 finance, we can trade stocks, we can trade FX, we can trade all these things. We can deposit some, we can ask for a loan on our house and etc. from a bank. All these things cannot be done in crypto as of now. Well, either from a from a technological perspective or from a legal perspective, right? So really, where when people go up to Web3 world, what they're trying to do or what they're trying to achieve is so very different from what they would do in a Web2 world. I guess if there are more interactions or crossing between the use cases of the Web2 and Web3 world, for example, now rather than trading FX in Web2, we can also trade it in Web3. Then will we see more incentive for people to build the infrastructure to facilitate what you described, where the backend is actually Web3, but the interaction, the user experience is actually in parity with Web2.
Yeah, 100%. I think, Ben, I agree with your how you're thinking about this, right? And I want to elaborate this a bit more. Is blockchain technology is not the end, right? It's a means to an end. And people get even some of the Bitcoin developers get that confused, right? They think Bitcoin is the end. No, Bitcoin is not the end. It's a means to an end, right? And what is that end? That end is ownership, right? So blockchain enables true ownership, and that's all it does, right? Now, and if we think about that, is well, like, what does that mean for the society? Well, you have ownership, right? And there's many things in the world that you want to have ownership to. and they're not black and white. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we're making in this industry is thinking ownership is a black and white scenario, right? I look at this as we're on a spectrum. Okay, on the left hand side, I really don't give a shit if I own it or not, and on the right hand side, I absolutely need to own this, right? An example on the right is money, right? We all understand why you don't want to share a bank account with your brother or your sister, or sometimes maybe your freaking wife or husband, right? Like if we don't understand that part, then let's not have this conversation. So then from that part, then you kind of traverse back, right? You have data ownership, you have gaming asset ownership, you have some stuff. So at the end of the day, like it's not black and white. So I think the most important and critical use case for blockchain really is financial related, and just like what you said, right? What does that empower? True ownership. So then how does it work? I think it will infuse with Web2 technology, right? Forex trading, just like you said, stock trading, it will power the financial world, right? Settlement, payment, remittance, and so forth. And today we're not seeing a lot of application being built on top of blockchain. There's actually many issues. One, there's too much noises, right? Meaning people who are using blockchain as a way to enrich themselves very quickly. That's a noise, right? People who are actually building real product takes a long time. Two is I also think there's a lot of things that are missing in the blockchain world. For example, we don't have enough scalability. We don't have enough security. The user experience is horrible, right? And we also face the problem is like, if you remember early 2000, right? A shitty Craigslist page or it worked out really well because it's a net improvement. Doesn't matter how horrible the page looked, it's still better than your yellow page that's sitting on top of your desk, right? So it's a net new improvement when it comes to user experience. You don't get that as for Web3. It's a net compromise when it comes to user experience, right? So what do you gain? You gain ownership, but ownership is not something that you can see, and not a lot of people, like, unless you got sanctioned before or your bank account got shut down, you're like 90% of people don't get it, the importance of ownership, right? So unless you can offer a product that's just as good as the Web2 user experience, you will have a hard time adopting this technology, right?
I actually have a little bit of different opinion on this because I always say the most natural use case for Web3 is actually international money transfer, and this, in comparison with the SWIFT system, is so much better. Even what Bitcoin offers, right? So even if you're transferring funds, like for example, you're transferring it to me, the only thing I need to do is just to give you my address, and it will be in my account. Your transfer will be in my account in as fast as 2 seconds, or as slow as, I don't know, like a few hours. But even a few hours compared to, for example, using the SWIFT system, where you have to go to your branch and then give them a bunch of account information that I gave you, and they validate it. And you have to pay $25 to wire that money. I have to wait for a day to receive it, and my bank would charge me another $25 for it. I mean, compared with that kind of user experience, I think crypto offers a whole much better UX for money transfer, and that's a gazillion-dollar industry on an annual basis. But the problem with that is it's not legal, right? So I'm not sure how you see the path towards crypto being fully legalized and the applications will be regulated and having all the compliances, or do you see sort of a not anarchist, but basically a more rogue approach?
Yeah. So before I dive into this a bit, is just going back to the user experience a little bit, right? I think the part that we haven't really considered is the amount of friction that you will have if you're the first time user of crypto when you do international payment, right? So for example, if you're trying to send crypto to someone that's never touched crypto, right? The choice you have to make is, do I want to spend 20 or 30 minutes educating this person and still be called a scammer, or just send using traditional rail, right?
Right.
And we need to improve that experience so that you can't just be like, hey, let's use crypto, right? So that's also part of user experience. However, when we talk about legality, right, I generally think it's always going to be a delicate balance between regulatory constraints and acceptance versus, hey, you're just going to be the Wild West, right? A good analogy is, well, like, obviously, do we want to legalize or completely take off any restriction for gun ownership in the US, right? That's always a debated topic. I think definitely we understand what crypto provides, freedom and so forth. But as long as there's government in control, there's government presence, it wants to achieve things that it wants to achieve, right? Such as, why do we have the OFAC sanction list and so forth? So I think going forward, it will always have that struggle, right? And depending on the outcome of the election, the politics, at least in the US, you will face drastic different environment, right? So I don't think it's a very clear picture that we have on how these things will pan out. But one thing is for certain, just like you said, international payment, there are a lot of use cases that crypto are just perfect for, that surpasses the traditional finance system, right? Now, whether it's legal, it takes time for us to figure that out.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that the House has already passed the FIT 21 bill, and now it's well, we're just basically waiting for the new Senate to come in and start voting on this bill. But the good thing is that now we have both party with consensus to pass the bill in the Congress. I don't really see it to have a huge barrier to pass in the Senate, but I agree with you. Even if it's passed, it's only a guideline. Then it will be in the hands of the CFTC and the SEC and FINRA, FinTrack, like all those people, right? To figure out how exactly to identify whether a token is a security or a commodity or a mean of circulation, etc., and how do they want to regulate it in terms of trading, circulation, lending, borrowing, and all kinds of activities. So yeah, definitely we have a very long way ahead of us.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about this, what does Bitcoin achieve, right? Like, if we truly adopt Bitcoin, then we have a complete decouplement between governance and in finance, right? Throughout history, the government is always coupled with its very financial system, meaning they exert 100% control, right? So if we were to adopt Bitcoin completely, then that also implies that the society has the ability to take control of the government overnight, or at least bankrupt the government overnight, right? So it's a lot of things that humanity as a whole has never experienced before.
But speaking of which, do you think that justifies the high valuation of all these crypto projects? And I'll give you an example, which I always give as a joke. Sam Altman runs two projects. One is called OpenAI, which rolled out ChatGPT and a couple of other product. And when that was sold to Microsoft, valuation was around $80 billion. However, he has another project called WorldCoin, which, I don't want to call it a scam or anything, but basically, it's what it is, right? And at the peak, its valuation, or say full FDV, what was that called? Fully diluted value, was $86 billion. That's even higher than OpenAI. So do you think the high valuations of crypto is justified, especially coming from a perspective of being able to, well, I understand you also understand the VC business for traditional finance. Do you see a discrepancy in the valuation in crypto?
This is how I think about this. I generally think we're still going through price discovery on how we value these projects, right? I think the WorldCoin the WorldCoin project is highly controversial because it has a physical component to it, right? Like, hey, let's scan your your a certain body part, whether it's your hand, your eyes, whatever, and then you and so forth. But however, one thing that I always think about is there was one period of time, and this is before Tesla actually became mainstream. The total market share, the total market cap of Tesla was worth more than the next like 7 or 8 auto companies combined, including Toyota. And I think that's pretty similar to where crypto is today, right? Like, let's be honest, like Ethereum is at what, like 300 some billion dollar FDV, I believe, right? Now, purely based on like income revenue, can you justify that price point? I would say probably not. But why is there a price premium, right? Well, what is the future expected value of this project? So I think that's how I think about this. But yeah, WorldCoin in itself is a highly controversial project. But generally speaking, like how you price a crypto project really depends on what you think, how you think about this industry, like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, or like 2 decades from now. But overall, I think it's such a nascent industry, right? Like crypto VC is not a thing until like 2017, 2018, right? So this is like 7 years old. I think the industry itself is still going through like a big price discovery process. And as I was talking, I just looked up WorldCoin's FTV. Now it's like 16 billion. So, people are coming to realization, hey, maybe it's not worth as much as OpenAI. So, yeah.
Yeah, but even $16 billion is a lot, considering what it has, right? It has, I think, globally, like 200 or something machine that is constantly like actively working, and they still haven't found a way to mass produce this this piece of equipment. So, and considering that the number of countries that are already banning people from using WorldCoin, or WorldCoin ever getting close to their citizens to scan their body parts, I'm still not seeing how that 16 billion work out in terms of from a valuation perspective, and especially and you brought up Tesla. I think is a very good example in the sense that Tesla was also heavily criticized for having an extremely high valuation back then when it was not even producing anything, right? But at least the good thing is the entire auto industry, the size of it, the scale of it, and everything is there, and you can at least have a little bit of a sense in terms of saying, okay, if we were to take 10% of that industry, how much that company is going to worth, and etc. Right? And today, really, there's no comparable for crypto. Like when you say, okay, how should I value Ethereum? Is there any target, or is there any comparables in any traditional finance sense, or anything else that you can use as a comparable?
I think even that is questionable on how you want to compare this, right? People compare gold to Bitcoin, right? And is that a fair comparison? Because it's just such a nascent industry, I think we need more time. Now, what is the proper benchmark for Ethereum, right? One argument could be made is it's a web, like decentralized version of payment processor or general compute. Or if you like crypto and you think it's doing something, then it could be the global settlement layer for all future transactions, right? However you want to do this, I think it's largely controversial in how you value this. And this just justifies one thing, is the high volatility of crypto, right? Maybe one day people realize, wait a minute, it's much bigger than what we think it is, and boom, you will have price going up, right? So I tend not to, we're not investors in WorldCoin, but we're definitely active in the Ethereum ecosystem. We have our own mental model of how things should work, right? But generally speaking, things are very much highly dynamic, right? So we take a holistic approach of how we think about the valuations of projects.
Yeah, do you see like you guys target a certain kind of project to invest, for example, the infra, and then or you do like DeFi, GameFi? Is a particular area that you guys focus on a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think to us, Buxer, right? Again, builder user experience reversion is extremely critical. We're less sensitive to whether it's application level or infrastructure level. Primarily, we still think there are tons of work that needs to happen at the infrastructure level, but we're starting to see some innovations at the application level as well, right? And we are very agnostic to where that project's originating, right? Whether it's from the West or the East. I think what matters the most is the founders, right? And Ben, we talked about this, is like the speed to liquidity is so fast, and because there's a lack of effective framework on how you can govern some of these projects, founder bet becomes even more important, right? So to us, we were betting on the founders in addition to the technology they're building.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have the last question. And then we can, for the sake of time, I will ask one more. And then I wonder, do you see way too many layer 2s or infra project, and then they're just giving a bunch of incentive to attract user, and then, that's kind of the playbook.
Then
how do you guys
once
see
they TGE, poof, they're gone.
Yes, the ugly truth is, for early stage pre-seed and seed venture capital firm, we see even more of those that never make out of the fundraise status, right? They just don't raise money and they don't create this project. But generally speaking, I do think there is an oversupply of these type of ecosystem projects, in my selfish opinion, that don't serve any purpose. However, then the question becomes, do we have too many layer 1s and layer 2s? That I want to be very clear about is I don't think there's enough L1s, L2s, because guess what? Today the user experience is horrible, and these L1s are not addressing the user experiences they should provide, right? A really simple example is, we invested in Monad pre-seed, right, back in 2022. And one of the things they were doing is meaningfully increase the user experience, right, by providing highly scalable EVM executions, smart contracts, and so forth. So I think is there opportunity for new L1s, L2s? Absolutely, right? So I think those two things are very orthogonal. Like, do I think there is like too much bullshit? Yes, I do, right? And do I think there's room for growth? I also do.
Right.
I hope this helps, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think
we can agree on this. There's a lot of shit, but not enough good stuff out there that are really solving real problems.
Yeah, and I think the market's moving towards the right direction, right? I think Binance and OKX are not listing some of the bigger infra projects because they believe it's not serving the right purpose, right? I think that's a good sign. The less incentive for people to create these meaningless infrastructure, the better it is, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to admit, like, retails are not very good at picking out the right things, aside from, hey, people, the KOLs telling them, hey, this is the great thing, go try it, right? And they eventually get hurt because they buy the tokens and it drops 90% over a course of 12 months, right? So.
All right, cool. I think we're at time. Thanks a lot, Carl, for sharing with us your insights. I always appreciate an intelligent conversation like this. And I hope everybody who's watching this enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. All right.
Thanks, everyone.